God, I've forgotten how good these things are. Anyway, hello everyone and welcome to today's discussion topic. This time, we will be going over V-Rising. Yes, I know I vanished for a good chunk and I beat this game months ago, but frankly, I've been a bit busy with setting up a new house, so cut me some slack. A crafting top-down action game made by Stunlock Studios and produced by Level Infinite that made some waves back into early access and came out in full release early May 2024. I played the heck out of this one with over 110 hours during the early access and after its release, so let's get into it. The premise here is you wake up as a vampire. A very hungry, pale, old, shabby looking vampire, much like how some of my favorite streamers look like. And yes, that description fits me too, just to beat you all to the punch. Your vampire is one of the last of its kind after being wiped out by humans. Without preamble, you begin building a castle and laying waste to everything around you, because what else would you do in your situation? That truly is the only real story, and really all that's needed. There are snippets of the back history in the world you can read, mostly with boss descriptions, but that's about it. The goal is to rule the world. Do you really need to know more? It's a pretty world that was created here. Visuals are crisp, and I think the game has a pretty good holding power over time. The biomes have a very distinctive theme to the look, and there is a very welcoming variety of enemies designed whose attacks animations are clean on the screen. I saw very little repeated enemies crossed over into the different biomes, with probably the worst offender really just being the basic wolf, but with a disease or ice or a fire element to them. The music and sound effects were adequate without getting overbearing. It did manage to create an ambiance that enabled you to sink into the play session without being too over the top, and just managed to skirt the edge of getting repetitive. The audio and visual cues inside of combat were also pretty spot on with what's going on around you, which passes the gamer check. Regarding the world, everything with the exception of like 4 NPCs is an enemy begging to become food.
Get in my belly!
Probably the most contentious part of this game was the decision to go with an isometric camera style inside of a crafting game, but frankly, I think they pulled it off very well. There are a handful of cases where it can get hard to see what is going on when a tree, rock, etc. fades through your view, but I found it to be mostly an early game issue where more of the bosses are free roaming, open worldish encounters where you're constantly frustrated by roaming mobs you can't see, accidentally leashing the boss so far away it resets without warning, or playing getting stuck having to fight it in a sloppy territory. These early to mid fights are kind of wretched feeling, but by the true mid game, most bosses start to have their own arenas, which circumvent these problems and start feeling much better to do. Also, thankfully, the early game goes pretty quick for a crafting game, and doesn't start to slow down much until the middle, where more of the world is open to you. My personal opinion about the survival-based building genre is that in actuality, the actual crafting and building aspect is an even tie with the combat gameplay, so let me hit that first. One of the many big pluses V-Rising accomplishes is letting new players get into getting creative buildings very quickly without much time investment. You can progress from a base shelter to a basic castle in under 2 hours without much fuss. You very quickly find entire areas filled with ores and resources needed to pretty much do the entire first biome, and honestly even the second one on making you burn yourself out. Even the crafting times is very generous, with pretty much everything at the start just taking somewhere around 30 seconds or less to smelt the entry items. It's a pretty fair respect for your time, but I will note by the end game things will be taking 2 to 3 minutes per shot to smelt. As far as these games are concerned, I still consider that fair, since you are meant to just head out and go get something else, as things are made because the game automates the creation so you don't have to just stand there yourself. Even the usual assortment of potions and consumables just get created as you walk around. The connected part to this topic is the actual building. Let me tell you, my ability to place walls and creatively build things in these games amount to the level of slums. My second playthrough, I did a co-op with viewer assistants who made a far more worthy place of residence than anything I could ever dream up, so shout out to you all for what I'm showing you now. The point I was trying to make is that even I couldn't really mess this up. Unlike more conventional survival games like Conan, Valheim, or Enshrouded, V-Rising makes good use of their top-down view to easily snap walls, windows, and doors into place, while avoiding the painful roof building or awkward wall stacking parts where I always make the most crooked hovels or just plain shoeboxes, and just auto-generates the ceiling once proper parts are in place. Also, shout out to the very easy to understand building base menu and crafting station lists. It's actually a huge win for not making a brick wall text and menus that require 2 advils and some eye drops to read through. The next topic, eliminating everything on the map you see and making meals out of them.
Boil water? What am I, a chemist?
I would not call the general weapon system anything groundbreaking, but it does take typical quick change inventory slots you use for weapons and tools and makes it crisp and, more importantly, universal. I actually enjoyed the decluttering and less messy inventory management in that axes double up as either weapons or deforesting areas because trees are alive and we aren't about that as vampires. Maces break mines or enemy heads, either way, you get the point. There are a fairly impressive 11 weapon types in the game with long, medium, and melee ranges to mix things up with, and each weapon type boasts 2 unique activated abilities that function as cooldown weapon arts. I actually thought they did a remarkable job creating bosses with the idea where you'll likely want a weapon with some range and a melee weapon of some sort to switch back and forth to during the fight without locking you into a one weapon does it best all the time. I used most of them on and off during my playthrough, but once you get into the deeper weapon trees, it does get pretty hard to switch to something new to try, since you have to go through most of the creations from the ground up to make the higher weapons since they piggyback off each other. So make sure you like the weapon playstyle you settle into before remake costs get out of control. The armor system is pretty much the same as everything else. Build the slots to not be naked with one of 3 sets of gear that have different bonuses to match your playstyle. The one caveat is that in V-Rising, the game progresses difficulty directly to your item level, with your damage taken and done directly correlating to your gear level versus the enemy level. This creates a soft cap to how far you can go, so plan this game to be 80% linear in your progression, although you could skip ahead a few bosses per gear score. All of that is fairly simple, were really just bare bone preference decisions, but they intended the spells in the game to be a real variety in choice. Unfortunately, this is where I felt the game had some frustrating hiccups, and to explain it I have to drill into a few other topics first. In practice, you pick a mobility spell, any 2 normal spells, and an ultimate from 6 schools of magic, each with 4 attack/support spells, 1 defensive shield, a movement spell, and 2 ultimate spells per school. You can further augment your spells with gems that cause them to do all kinds of stuff. Additional effects, amplify power, you get the gist. It's pretty cool the combination you can come up with here to solve problems you run into. There's also an altar where you can amplify a school of your choice, but that's a bit more narrow, so it gets a footnote than anything. Now for where things cascade a bit. You only get 1 mobility button, which is used as your dodge, on a typically longer cooldown. The movement in the game is also kind of slow. Bosses like throwing attacks fairly rapidly and in large area of effects that home in on you like missiles. Take those 3 statements and it causes later game boss fights to be an arms race of trying madly to read each attack perfectly, since you cannot reliably dodge out of half of the things coming at you and have to scramble out of them. The meta, when I was playing at least, was to actually stack movement speed to the hilt because that was the only way you were going to survive. We double back to those spell selections we were happy about, and now one of your spell slots will probably be a shield to go with the dodge, and even then it is still nutty frantic. It doesn't have to be, but it's pretty set that you need that button eventually. Now I will take 2 steps back and say that there is a very simple and relaxed spell respec system for changing things up. Also, there are 3 difficulty settings as well as a PvP server, which I do not do typically. As seen in most games these days, there are relaxed builder modes, a normal difficulty, and a brutal setting. I beat all of normal twice, once solo and once with viewer co-op, and would confidently say that you could probably accomplish this with pretty much any combination of things you want to use if you're sharp. Brutal, however, was, well, beyond unfair. The team did make it to the final 6 bosses in Act 4, but I at least found it rage-inducing with how limited your movement is in the game versus what the bosses would throw at you, to the point that makes you wonder what the point is. As a reference, according to Steam's achievement tracker, only 4.8% of players completed even Act 1 on the brutal setting. I always felt that with the way they want the bosses to stress you, they could easily afford to cut the cooldown on movement dodges in half, so you're not always scared of using a button to just die afterward with no counterplay. I would be interested in hearing what you all think on this topic in reference to the higher end fights in the comments below. That's it. That's my thoughts. Outside the issues that mostly came up with the brutal difficulty with movement, this game was absolutely fantastic. I almost never sink this much time into a survival game due to getting bored with the visuals and combat, and here I was doing it 3 times. I love the way the weapons could switch in mid-fight, and then customizing spell sets to really set up some impressive win conditions. Now my score is an A. That's right, one of my higher scores I have given so far on this channel, and probably the best game I have played in this genre so far. If you do survival games, you would be doing yourself a disservice in not playing this game. Until the next video though, you can catch me over on Twitch on Von Dinnerbell doing who knows what variety content, and for catching my next video, hit the like follow button for the algorithm gods, and until my next video here, dinner's done.